Hi students, this is the PowerPoint that I would have gone over if we were in class together today. Please watch it carefully. Not only are you going to learn about how to answer the questions on this quiz, but you're going to be able to understand better how to answer questions on the upcoming midterm quiz. Because I tell you, like, what I'm telling you now is on the midterm quiz. And then you're also going to do a lot better on the final. Do not skip any of the sources lesson. This is a big deal in this class because most people don't get taught this, but you're expected to know this. And if you look back at sort of the expected research skills that you're supposed to have for this class, it's everything that we're talking about. But again, you've probably never been taught it before. And my research shows that even though all of the professors are expecting you all to know this already, they're not spending the time to teach it to you. And so that's why we're actually taking that time, because you need to know it, and I want to make sure that you do. Okay, so the first two questions on the reading quiz, what's the one difference between all academic sources and non-academic sources? That second question, what is one of the 4 types of forbidden sources? Let's talk about both of those for a second. So for question 1, I often get these wrong answers, that the difference between the different types of sources is that peer-reviewed or that academic sources are always peer-reviewed, or that academic sources are always fact-checked. That's not the answer at all. And in fact, you've seen this already, because on the true-false practice quiz that we did earlier in the class, like, there was a question, academic sources are always peer-reviewed and fact-checked, and that was false for you, so we don't want to do that. For the right answer has been on the pretest, and it's been both in the instructions and in the questions, and it's our reading day for today. It says reading day 4 there, but we're reading it at a different time. But, that's where that answer has been. I've also said it in a homework assignment for last week. So for question 2, the difference, or not the difference, but the 4 forbidden sources. One of the wrong answers I get is students tell me that I wouldn't let them use any non-academic sources. Okay, that's also been on the pretest. In the chapter on non-academic sources, we have a whole section called Why Might We Use Non-Academic Sources? So I'm definitely letting you use non-academic sources. And in fact, it's right after these 2 paragraphs in the book that I list the forbidden sources in a bullet list. So you just have to go back and read that. One of the top wrong answers is social media. This was also on the pretest, and that was false. And then the homework for today says, here are the previous wrong answers to what I would forbid. I don't forbid blogs. I don't forbid non-academic sources. I don't forbid social media. I don't forbid literature. I don't forbid newspapers and magazines. And the homework explains why all of those sources can be fine in certain contexts, especially newspapers with fact-check news. So that's not going to work. Just please go read that section of the chapter that gives you the actual forbidden sources. Some people give me just the first line of the evaluating non-academic sources chapter, and they just say, it says non-academic sources are the sources we use every day: news, magazines, blogs, Facebook posts, tweets, almost, and they just list all those as if that's the forbidden list. That's just the list, like, of things that these are. So for those first 2 questions, what's the one main difference between academic and non-academic sources? It's audience. Academic sources are written by academics for academics about their academic research. Everything else in the world is a non-academic source, and that's most of the stuff. So that's what you've seen most often in your lives. And I want to note that on the quiz, don't say that, like, you can say that non-academic sources are for lay audiences, but you can't say that they're for general audiences or wide audiences. I can send a tweet or out to just people on the internet, like, and I can specifically at somebody, right? Telling them that's for them. It's not for anything else. I can send a text to my aunt, which is what I was originally going to say, but then said tweet by mistake. I can send a text to my aunt. That text is only for her. She's the only audience in the world who's supposed to read that. It's still a non-academic source, even though it's very, very narrow. Okay, I'm also going to ask you about predatory journals. So on the pretest, there was a question that says some academic sources are unreliable and or biased, and then I mentioned that examples of that would be predatory journals. And our chapter for the academic sources today went over predatory journals. So predatory journals, are they academic or non-academic? They are academic. They are academics writing to other academics about their academic research. That's who writes those journal articles. That's who's supposed to read the journal articles. The problem with predatory journals is not asking our authors to pay. That's how open access works, right? In open access, you don't pay to read something, but somebody still has to pay for that to get published, for there to be a webmaster, all that other shit. So every open source journal asks authors to pay. Whether they are wonderful journals, and there are some wonderful open access journals, or whether they are completely shitty, fake, predatory journals. That's just how open access works. So when open access journals became a thing and authors were paying to get published in them, shady people said, well, let's pretend to be a journal and get authors to pay us. And they do fool some authors to publish there, and they do fool some people, especially students who are getting research from Google Scholar, Google, and AI, fooling students into thinking they're seeing an actual paper from a peer-reviewed journal. So the actual problem is that they're lying about doing peer review. The fake predatory journals say they're a peer-reviewed journal, and they say we've run this by scholars. They have not. They will publish anything as long as you pay them. There's an amazing example, and I'm about to show you a screenshot of it. But these authors were irritated because they kept getting emails from predatory journals. They email all of us a lot, trying to get us to give them money. And so these guys wrote a paper about it, a paper that got accepted. So my absolute favorite example of a paper that got accepted into a predatory journal is called Get Me Off Your Fucking Mailing List. And as you can see, the abstract is get me off your fucking mailing list, get me off your fucking mailing list, get me off your fucking mailing list. Okay, this is the paper they sent in. The entire paper is get me off your fucking mailing list. And they got an email back from that publisher that said, congratulations, your paper has passed peer review. Give us, however much money it was, and then we'll publish it. These authors were so tired of this shit that in the paper, not only did they keep just saying, get me off your fucking mailing list, but they made charts, y'all. They made charts. I love this so much. I love it so much. The time you take to really show your anger at predatory journals. Okay, so how do we avoid predatory journals? We don't use AI. We don't use Google Scholar. We don't use Google, of course. And that's because AI does not know the difference between a real open access journal and a predatory access journal. Google Scholar does not know the difference between a real open access journal and a predatory open access journal. So the quick thing that SCC students can do to avoid predatory journals is to be in our library databases. So you log into SCC, like I just did it to test that it was still working a couple minutes ago, and I log in with my Duo stuff. Some specific databases, not all of them, but some of them allow you to filter to only peer-reviewed journals. So you'll see in the database there's something like this that you can limit in this way. This is going to be on the midterm. One of the questions on the midterm, which is untimed and open note, and this PowerPoint is in files for you, so, or this video rather of the PowerPoint is in files for you, so you can always still go back and see this, and the answer is going to be right here at this point in the video. But what I'm going to ask you is, what is the quick thing that an SCC student can do to make sure that the journal that they have found something in peer reviews some of its articles? And you can say some of our databases allow us to narrow down. Big warning, and this is also going to be on the midterm. This cannot tell you if the article that you have found is peer-reviewed. It's only saying we've narrowed down to things in peer-reviewed journals, but there are lots of things that we publish in peer-reviewed journals that are not peer-reviewed. Bibliographies, letters to the editor. Like in mine, we publish student prize-winning essays. They're labeled as student prize-winning essays, right? Those haven't been peer-reviewed. They just won a prize. And then other things like book reviews. So this is something that might fool you if you're not paying attention. This is a review, and it's, Deep Things Out of Darkness. You'll notice that this is only 2 pages long, and you'll see the little thing that says peer-reviewed there. That just means the journal does peer review. It does not mean that this book review, and that's what it is, it does not mean that this got peer reviewed. It did not. The journal, though, does peer review. Okay, so there's a second step. The second step is also going to be on the midterm, because it's not enough to narrow down to a peer-reviewed journal. You have to make sure that your article is peer-reviewed if you're required to find a peer-reviewed journal article. So the way we do that is to use the table of contents. So for the article analysis essay, I had a student do it on this article, the physician gag clause. Which are when places pass laws about what doctors can say to their patients. So when I was growing up in the South, for example, doctors were, and they might still be, forbidden to say the word abortion or suggest abortion, even in high-risk pregnancies and stuff like that. That's, of course, a violation of the First Amendment. And those laws get struck down once they move up through the courts. But you have to have the money to move up through the courts with them. Anyway, so the student did the article analysis on this. And when I started reading the student's paper, I was like, that doesn't sound like a peer-reviewed article from the summary. It sounds like an opinion piece. So I went to the article, and this is the article. And you'll see it's very fancy. It has an introduction. It's written very formally. It has sources. This is from a legal journal. Legal opinion pieces that are not peer-reviewed still sound like lawyers are writing them, and that's because legal scholars are writing to other legal scholars about their legal scholarship. So this is still academic. It's just, since it's an opinion piece, it has not been peer-reviewed. It's an editorial. So how do we know this? We go to the table of contents, and you'll see that the first thing it's listing are the articles, but then when you get to the next page, it says comments. And this is under comments. That means it's an opinion piece. Sometimes you don't even need to go to the table of contents. Like this is a letter signed by Sue Wing et al. A couple of months ago about pandemic response. Sue Wing, by the way, went to middle school and high school with me. And she's very excited that I show this article to my students. Because, she knows somebody's paying attention. But it says at the top, correspondence, which is a fancy word for letter. Okay. So one question on the midterm will be, what is one of the things that an SCC student can do to make sure they have a journal that peer reviews some of its articles? And you're going to say some of the databases let us narrow down to peer review. Then the next question is going to be, how do you make sure, though, that the article that you're looking at is peer-reviewed? And you're going to say, I'm going to go to the table of contents and I'm going to look at things labeled research, articles, original research, or literature reviews. And then what isn't? Okay, so notes, comments, case studies, bibliographies, conference proceedings, opinion, book, media, film, play reviews, contest winners, table of contents, correspondence, letters, newsletters, perspectives, commentary, like all of those other things, right? So you go to the table of contents and you make sure it's marked this way and not with one of these. That's how you make sure you have a peer-reviewed article. Okay, speaking of not trusting AI, this woman posted that ChatGPT asked her if she wanted to see what was going on in her pregnant belly because she was pregnant. And if you look at this closely, you will see that AI created a diagram in which the baby comes out of the asshole. And that's not where babies come out. Do not trust AI. AI problems. It was trained by programmers who stole human authors' work. It has been verified, by the way, that some of my books were stolen to train AI, and I'm very pissed about that. It lies. The industry calls that hallucination, but it's just lying to you. It doesn't distinguish between real studies and those in predatory journals. It cannot see the academic writing published in subscription-funded journals. So it can't see anything but open access. And most of open access is shit. It's also bad for the environment, for those of you who care about that at all. So I gave you an example here. A student was trying to answer the question on the article analysis sheet of what citation style the journal was using. And you'll see the AI answer up here says that Social Science Quarterly uses Chicago. Right below it, the actual Google thing shows you the quote from the journal page, which says it uses APA. Guess which was right? The quote from the actual journal page. AI was wrong. The student gave me the AI answer and lost a bunch of points on the paper. That we just cannot trust AI. I'm sure some of you have seen too that AI for interpersonal relationships has hurt quite a few people. It told a young man, a teenager, how to kill himself and to not let him know what he was about to do. There was another man who was mentally disturbed who thought that his mother was drugging him by putting psychedelics in his car vents, and AI confirmed his belief and egged him on. And that guy killed his mother and killed himself because AI told him, yeah, and what a horrible thing for her to be doing to you like that. Please, please, please don't trust these things. All right, back to our regularly scheduled programming. So our key terms today, literature reviews and what they are. So as we know from the pre-test, they are not movie and book reviews, right? So it's not any of those things. It's also not a literary review, which is that fancy way of saying book review. What a literature review is, it's a type of academic article, a peer-reviewed academic article, in which someone takes all of the current literature in the field, all the current studies in the field, and it synthesizes those so it can tell us, hey, what do we know about this topic based on the good recent literature in the field? Maybe what do we know about which treatment for an ACL tear is going to work better, kind of thing, because different studies are going to have different findings. So that's what we use that for. Our other terms today, right, there's editing, just the basic like checks to make sure something goes through, which is different from peer review, which is different from fact checking. So let's talk about fact checking first. Although I do want to point out, and I'm a little out of order now, that when we talk about literature reviews as sources, we're talking about the standalone ones, not the literature review sections in academic article. Anyway, fact checking. Fact checking is when you go through something and this is usually, it's supposed to be done by someone who is not the author, an independent person who didn't write it. And they go through everything, checking that all of the facts are true, right? If in a newspaper article you said that, a fire happened at 409, 6th Street, that it was that address. If there's citations, you check those. Most things are not fact checked. If you're just fact checking a little news article, that's not going to take that long. But if you're fact checking the entire newspaper for that day, it takes a long time. And it takes a very long time for books and stuff. So almost no books are fact checked. I want you to guess in your head how much money it costs to have a book fact checked by someone who isn't the author. The number, depending on what the book is about and the length of the book, is between $5,000 and $20,000. And this is why almost no books are fact-checked, because most books never make $5,000. I have 5 books. I have not made $5,000. I honestly don't think that I will, even with all 5 of them combined. So I sure as hell am not going to spend money to fact check those, and my publisher isn't going to spend that money to fact check those. That's just not how publishing works. So who does the fact checking? It's experts in research, not subject experts. So if you're fact checking a medical news piece, you don't have a doctor fact check that. You have an expert in doing research fact check it. Which process takes the longest? Again, if it's something short, like just a quick little article, then fact checking doesn't take that long. But peer review takes a bit longer, but then fact checking big things takes a lot longer than peer review does, because again, you're going through everything. I heard an amazing example of fact checking. So the New Yorker, which is a news magazine, fact checks its articles. And David Sedaris, who's a humor writer, was on a podcast, and he talked about the process of New Yorker fact checking. So he said, this is a quote, "The New Yorker fact checks everything. I had written that dinner at the Vatican was an 8-course meal, and the fact checker said I contacted the chef. I mean, how did he even find her? She said it was 7 courses. So David Sedaris did get invited, along with a bunch of other comedians, to the Vatican before the last pope died. And yes, that fact checker at the New Yorker contacted the chef to check that it was 8 courses. That's what fact checking is. That's why most things aren't fact checked. So what can we count on to be fact-checked? This is a question that's going to be on the midterm. What can we count on? Non-wiki encyclopedias and dictionaries, basically reference books. Non-wiki, because of course in wiki you just let all the randos quote-unquote fact-check you. Reliable news, including news magazine articles like The Atlantic and The New Yorker, and academic news. So good news gets fact-checked. Some government and NGO pages. NGO means non-governmental organizations. So that would be like the WHO, the World Health Organization, right? So those are the things we can count on to be fact-checked. We cannot count on anything else being fact-checked, ever. So some news and NGO samples, right? This is an NPR page up at the top. That's a news site. And they mark what's news, and then they mark what's opinion and all these other things. Then we've got a WHO page up there about the Zika virus, and that will have been fact-checked. And that's because, right, I mean, an organization talking about the Zika virus, if it says a certain amount of people died from it 2 years ago, it's going to fact-check that number and make sure that that's accurate. For news, I've got the Chronicle of Higher Education up here. That's an academic newspaper. And so you'll see they've got at the top latest news, but then at the bottom, latest opinion. So the stuff at the top is going to be fact-checked. The stuff at the bottom is not going to be fact-checked because it's news articles that get fact-checked, not all of the other stuff. So, what's not fact checked? Most things. So, opinion and entertainment pieces in news publications and shows are not fact checked. Academic research is not fact checked. Books. Let's talk about, well, I said let's look at a few, but we're just going to talk about one. So, Mark Meadows, who was a former chief of staff under the first Trump administration, is being sued by his publisher for lying in his book. Because the way publishing works is we, the authors, sign that if we screwed anything up, that we're the ones who get sued. So Mark Meadows said in his book that the 2020 election was stolen and that they had evidence for that. But when he was under oath in a courtroom where there would be punishments for lying, he said they had absolutely no evidence that anything had been stolen, and that he never thought that the election was stolen, actually, even though that's what he was saying publicly. So then his publisher knew that they were going to lose a lot of sales because he had just admitted, I lied in my book, and so they sued him for that. Let's think for a second about news versus entertainment. So I put the kinds of news in the left, and I gave you some examples of that. And then, sort of what makes it news, journalistic standards, including fact-checking. But then entertainment in news includes horoscopes and movie reviews and cartoons and editorials and games. Let's talk about unreliable news. So it doesn't always make clear to the audience which parts are news and which parts are entertainment. If you watch those 24-hour news networks, and I just cannot watch any of them, but about half the shows are editorials, not news. Other countries, not all of the others, but many, have laws that if you have the word news on the screen, you're not allowed to have an opinion show that isn't fact-checked right then. Like, for your opinion shows, the word news should not appear because that can mislead people. They can think they're actually getting information. Ronald Reagan repealed what's called the Fairness Doctrine, and that was that if there is a controversy about anything, that the news is required to give all sides of any controversial thing fair representation. Him repealing that then allowed Fox and other stuff. Sometimes news shows on those 24-hour networks try to get around the fact-checking rule because they'll have an opinion show and some person on the opinion show will say a lie, and then the news show says some people are saying this lie, and it's true, some people are saying that. It's not true. But that's how they get around the fact-checking, to keep lying to you. So I'm going to show you just an extraordinary example of that. As many of you know, a couple years ago, Fox and Dominion reached a settlement, $787 million, about Fox knowingly lying about Dominion during the 2020 thing. I used to explain this to all of my classes, but then The Daily Show made a video about it, and I think that they just do that even better than I do. So let's see if this will actually play. Will it play? It's not playing. Okay, I'm going to send the video to you so you can see it. But essentially, I'm not starting this video all over again just because this stupid video won't play. But essentially what it was is that Fox News got an email from this woman, and this woman said that she knew that the Dominion machines were rigged. She'd never saw a Dominion machine or anything like that. And she even said that she knew that she sounded cuckoo. And when you watch the video, you will see that she did, in fact, sound cuckoo. She, for example, says that she's a ghost who's been internally decapitated, yet she's still walking around. And she said that in the email, that she's not alive. But then they went on the air, the Fox News people, and they said, we have proof. Dominion was able to not to win because Fox settled, but to get Fox to settle, because during the discovery, all of the Fox News people had to turn over their text to each other. and all of their texts to each other showed that they knew that they were lying, that they did not believe what they were saying. And so that's why they settled. Again, I'll send the video to you and include it when I create the page for this lesson. All right, let's talk about other ways to use non-academic sources. So let's say you're writing an adaptation of Mulan. You're writing about one of those. So here's definitely what you don't want to do. You'll see that echeat.com, my computer wouldn't even let me go there because it's so awful. But yeah, I do not want to see in your paper about an adaptation of Mulan something from a cheat site. That's one of the forbidden sources. Don't cite from cheat sites. Come on. Students, by the way, do this all the time. And you fail the essay if you do that. Just completely fail. I will not take anything from a cheat site in your paper. I mean, that's a 0, not even an F. Okay. This might be a little better. This is from Tumblr, right? And so we just have a person talking about the film, and that can be useful. But it's probably a good idea to go listen to or read a review by an actual film critic, like a professional film critic. And so that's what we would get here at NPR. This is an opinion piece, right? So it's not going to be fact-checked in the same way. I mean, they're going to make sure you're getting the director of the movie right and stuff like that. But it's an opinion. But it's still, we would consider that a better opinion than some cheat site or just some rando. All right, let's finish up talking about peer review and what it is. So who does it? Why do some journals charge authors? We've talked about that, right? Who does it? Other experts in your field, other academics in your field of study. Why do some journals charge authors? Because they're open access and they suck. Do peer reviewers replicate studies? So I had some students admit to me last year that they thought that peer reviewers replicate the studies, and it hadn't occurred to me that that was a belief that was floating around out there. So no, peer reviewers cannot replicate studies. Like, I can't take time out of my research to go run your study, especially because peer reviewers don't get paid. This is just part of our academic service to the profession. That's what it's called. And so my boss, like, if you do a study that takes 3 years, do you think my boss is going to let me go run a 3-year study full time so that I can peer review your article? Hell no. And I don't have the money to do that. So yeah, but I was thinking specifically about this one Discover article. It was talking about a study that had been done about armor, Bronze Age armor in Greece. So Ken Wardle took replica Bronze Age armor to Greece. There, he recruited 13 Marines from the Hellenic Armed Forces and asked them to wear the replica while running extensive simulations of Bronze Age warfare. Each day of testing lasted for 11 hours. The participants ate diets mimicking those from the Bronze Age Greece. It's a fascinating study. It sounds really fun. If I'm the one peer reviewing this, I do not get to make armor, go to Greece, get some Greek army guys to run around for me. Nope. And this also shows why academic stuff can't fact check you. If Ken Wardle said that he recruited 13 Marines, I just have to trust him that it's 13 and not 12. There isn't a way for me to check everything that he was doing or to check that they were actually eating the right diet. So can I fact check this? No. Why don't databases say whether a specific article is peer reviewed, which you might be wanting them to do? It's because they're counting on you to have just common sense about it. And again, because they're making the same assumption that professors do, that students know this stuff. And I know that, most people don't until we go over this. So they're counting on you to know that a 2-page review of a book has not is not a peer-reviewed original research article. They're just wanting you to be able to know the difference between a book review and a research article. All right, what's the one thing that you can count on to be peer-reviewed? This is going to be on the midterm. The one thing that you can count on is research articles and peer-reviewed journals. Literature reviews are a subset of that, not a separate thing. And as I said, this question is going to be on the midterm. While some academic books are peer-reviewed, and there's a stupid reason for that I'm not going to go into, including some edited collections, you should never assume that they are. So I have 5 academic books. One of them has been peer-reviewed. It's the one that you're reading chapters out of. So, okay. That publisher does it, but that's very rare. I will say, and I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on that, that doesn't mean that actual peer-reviewed articles don't have mistakes sometimes. I mean, sometimes just people make mistakes. And then some academics, since academics are just people, there's a subset of people out there in the world who are liars. There is a subset of academics who are liars. And okay, so sometimes things happen. For example, the very, very famous study that first said that there were connections between autism and vaccines, that guy was lying. He admitted that he was lying. He was admitting he took money to lie. He lost his medical license. The study got retracted. Okay. All right. We've gone over it. You better do really well on these quizzes. If there are questions, please let me know.